Hey guys, welcome to this episode of The Backstory. My name's Aryan. I'm one of the co-creators of the podcast, and today I will be speaking to one of my close friends, Nick, who is who's been through quite a unique experience that maybe a lot of our audience and a lot of our viewers can't really relate to. So, firstly, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Nikhil. Aryan and I go way back all the way from high school.
All the way from high school.
Yeah, it's been quite a while actually. But so instead of going from high school to university, I went to national service for about 2 years. Roughly I did 9 months of infantry training and then 9 months of training other recruits. And that was roughly about my experience with a summary. But yeah.
So I spent a lot of time with Nick in high school as well as afterwards. I did a gap year after high school, and I think the biggest difference that he had with kind of his transition from high school, his transition after high school, was that, you know, like most of the people in our grade, you didn't go to university straight away.
Yeah.
You know, while all of us were kind of writing up university applications and finalizing where like what country we're going to live in next, you were kind of busy gearing up to go into the army, like literally 2 months after we graduated. So what was that like in terms of transition? Because it's quite different, isn't it? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I remember actually, because when we graduated from high school, we went to Koh Samui for a graduation trip. The whole grade is there, and then it was such a fantastic time. So one of my best experiences of my life.
Yeah.
And then landing, and then 2 months later having to just enlist into the military, shaving my head. It was such a big culture shock for me. It's just something I couldn't imagine myself ever doing.
What was the culture shock like? I mean, there's a lot that's spoken about, you know, culture shock, and it's often a bit of a buzzword. So tell me a little bit about what exactly that was and what was the experience going into the army?
Yeah, so as soon as I enlisted into my basic military training, everyone's head is shaved off, and the one thing that you can tell is that
this guy, he colored his hair blonde.
Yeah,
like he colored his hair blonde, like literally
during my
before.
Koh trip,
and within a month it was all gone, and he looked like a bit of a peanut.
In my defense, I wanted to do something with my hair before I shaved it all off. But yeah, no, the whole point of shaving your head is that, you know, everyone's the same. But the issue is that, you know, I stuck out like a sore thumb in terms of how I spoke, because coming from an international school, everyone spoke with kind of like an international accent.
Exactly,
everyone's from different countries. You kind of have a standardized way of speaking. And then on top of that, I think there was also, I was stuck in this international bubble that I think we all kind of realized once we branched out to university.
And it was like going into a completely different world with people from completely different backgrounds.
Yeah, so national service, everyone there is, you know, grew up in a local Singapore system. So like the academic systems are different, their upbringing might be slightly different. So it's a big culture shock in terms of, you know, not understanding some of the stereotypes or the stigmas that were attached to certain topics, or even how they spoke, the slang that they used. It was something that you kind of just had to pick up instantly. And I struggled with that in the beginning, because, you know, I would speak like this while everyone else spoke in a much different accent, and so everyone
in a very localized accent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how did you adapt to that? Because obviously you're not the only friend of mine that went through this experience, and I've lived through. I've kind of heard a lot of different people's take on this. But how did you adapt to it? Because I know a lot of students from our kind of background get an immediate feeling of isolation and alienation when they step into that kind of very localized do or die kind of environment. So how did you adapt to it?
I think for me personally, especially since you've met my parents and everything, when I'm at home, I speak with a slight Singaporean accent already, because I'm born in Malaysia.
This guy sounds completely different when he...
No one believes me, but going into national service, I had a bit of an accent, just a slight one. So it wasn't as hard for me to kind of speak their language. It was more so the slang that I picked up and kind of the understanding the stereotypes that were attached to certain things, as, you know, whether you make jokes about certain topics and you can understand where they're coming from. But in terms of how I kind of adapted to that, is that in national service you'll meet people that you love and you absolutely get along with, or you don't. The thing is, you still have to be able to work with everyone, and so it kind of links back to being able to adapt with everyone. You have to, you don't have a choice. And when you're forced and pushed into that environment, it's in human nature to just get used to it. You have to get used to it.
And what were the kind of relationships that you built immediately? Was it a thing of, did you feel like, you know, obviously it's quite easy to connect with people when you spot one kind of immediate commonality, I guess,
Yeah.
and common denominator that you might have. Did you actively go and look for that, or were you sort of the mindset that, okay, everyone here is going to be part of the same journey as me, is going to be part of the same bubble, and I have to try and make an effort with everyone? Because, you know, that is a massive part of how we build relationships. So how did you feel going into that?
I think in terms of relationship development for national service, you're forced into an environment where everyone is kind of in the same boat.
Yeah.
You know, you go into national service dreading it because it's 2 years of it. You know, it's a long time to kind of foresee. But everyone's in that same boat.
Yeah.
Everyone's struggling through the same issues. You're going through the same training. You're forced to spend so much time together that automatically you're just gonna you're gonna create a relationship with all these kind of people. And you're gonna have special bonds, a very unique one that no one else can, I guess, have, because only they would understand what you went through.
Exactly.
You went through it with them.
And again, there's a lot of kind of, from what I've heard, there's a lot of kind of brotherhood and camaraderie that comes with the people that you actually spend your 2 years with. And we'll touch on that later. But just really quickly now, I wanted to speak about, you know, how your relationships changed post high school, because obviously our grade was quite tight knit, I'd say. And obviously our friend group as well was pretty tight knit, and we still are to this day, thankfully. But how did relationships change in the sense that, you know, immediately people fly off to university, they get busy kind of making their own new friends in a totally different environment, whereas you're kind of here stuck in the exact same country for another 2 years, kind of slogging yourself in the army, going into the jungle pretty much every weekend and not even coming home for like until the weekends. So how did your relationships change with whoever you were close to in high school?
I think, like, in terms of the relationships that we had in high school, like especially our group of 7. For me, I think it actually kind of strengthened my relationship with you guys, especially yourself, because you took a gap year and you're working in Singapore.
Yeah, and I spent a lot of time with him, and I think that really formed a really close bond.
We got a lot closer because of that, because we saw each other almost like every
single weekend.
But I think in general,
a lot of beers involved, a lot of local food, stingrays.
That is true. We had a lot of stingrays. But I think it strengthened my relationship with my friends because I was going through a different phase in my life and I realized I had such a good support group. I could vent out to you guys. Every weekend when we had stingrays or when we had beer together, like, we would just talk about it. I'd be venting out and you'd just be hearing my stories, and it helped me kind of just be able to process everything I was going through.
And the way it even strengthened it is because I would give you such an objective opinion, because I would not know what exactly you were going through. There's no way I could even fathom it. So it definitely helped me kind of give you a very unbiased view.
Exactly.
So did you notice that with a lot of people? You know, because for me, I was with you, like, physically for that year, but other friends of ours that were actually overseas, how did that strengthen the bond?
For example, like, you know, one of our good friends, Origin. I would talk to him almost every other day as well, just through text. And
playing your League of Legends.
Exactly, like, I'll just vent out with him. You know, these small little activities I would have, you know, I'd be able to just talk to him about it, and I just knew he was there to support me. And it's just knowing that those people in my life were there doing such a, I would say, pivotal part of my life, that's what makes it so strong. It's like, I will always remember for the rest of my life the people that stuck by me. So I know, like, I see you guys go to university. It's pretty tough to, you know, go into the jungle and see you guys have the best time of your lives and everything. Obviously, it's a lot to adjust to. But I would say for the most part, it has been an amazing experience, and I think I got closer to you guys. And I don't think there was any restriction other than maybe the time zone difference. And just the availability for how often we can talk and stuff.
Was there ever a feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm really missing out on a massive opportunity at university? You knew obviously that it was 2 years away and you'd eventually get to it, and that your actual military service was pretty much mandatory and you had no way out of it. But did you ever feel a sense of like, did it ever make you upset or down to think that, oh my gosh, all my friends are out here partying and meeting new people, getting in relationships, I guess, even while I'm here sitting kind of in the jungle?
100%. I mean, I can remember so fondly. I was doing God duty, and it was just 4
We've had so many conversations about this as well.
Like, I talked to you about this so many times, and it really stuck with me because the same thoughts go through my mind almost every single day of my 2 years of service. It's like, I'll be there at 4 a.m. in the morning, there's nothing to do. I'm just, you know, guarding the gates, and you just hear birds chirping, and all that's going on in my mind is, I'm looking at my friends partying. I could be advancing my career, you know, creating new relationships and experiences. But I'm just there at 4 a.m. doing nothing.
But that's what that touches on what you're saying of it actually strengthening the existing bonds that you have and
Yeah.
people that stick by you through that kind of gap in experience
Exactly.
are the people that you'll always remember. So
There's a lot of self-reflection then
Yeah.
during those times as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, of
So it
course.
definitely
Yeah.
helped.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously I felt a lot of sadness. And I was so conflicted with, why am I here? Why am I doing this? What am I doing? Like, is it gonna be useful for me in the future?
Yeah.
Will I look back at these memories and be fond of it? Obviously now in hindsight, I'm so grateful for it.
I guess
so
there's a bit of
unique.
apprehension as well of like, when I eventually get to university, am I going to be way too old or way too mature?
Yeah, am I
versus-
gonna be able to transition?
Am I good? Yeah, exactly.
That's
The
what I was
same
so
way
worried
that
about.
Everyone in our immediate school community did.
I mean, there's a lot of advantages to it as well.
Of course, yeah,
all
yeah.
my friends have gone to university for the first 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to university 2 years behind, but I have my friends to kind of ask them questions.
Yeah.
I had like some guidance from you guys, so it's like I'm so grateful for it as well.
I say diving into the 2 years of your NS experience, just talk to me about the biggest takeaways you had, the biggest learning experiences, what that maybe one big memory was, what that one tough challenge was. Talk to me.
Yeah, sure. I think the first things that popped in my head when it comes to like my biggest takeaways was the whole anxiety, anxiousness, and nervousness I've always felt during my 2 years of national service.
Yeah.
I think it mainly stems from the idea that most people have anxiety when it comes to doing something new. I think national service, the fact that every day is something new, it's always a new experience. It was just a constant for me.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had to find a way to overcome it most of the time.
Right.
So I think a great example for me would be just like my first time throwing a hand grenade. There was
Okay.
so much
Wow.
anxiety
Yeah.
and nervousness
Yeah, yeah,
coming to it.
And that's a very normal thing there, isn't it? Right. I mean, it just sounds crazy to us, obviously, and it still sounds crazy to me, even though I've heard about it like so many times from you over the years.
But these are the kind of experiences like I'm talking about. You
Yeah,
get so
yeah.
nervous because what if something goes wrong and you start overthinking it. But for me, it's like how I kind of overcame all this was the fact that I tried envisioning what it would feel like once I've done it, how fulfilled I'd be, how accomplished I feel afterwards, and that was my main motivational factor in terms of how I would overcome these sort of anxiety or like nervousness that I felt. So that was definitely one of my biggest takeaways, and I think it applies to like even my academics now. If I'm about to sit for an exam, for example, I just kind of envision just do my best and think about how relieving it'll be afterwards.
Right. And it's such a normal kind of teaching that we get. It's such a normal thing that we get told. It's just like, when you face a difficult situation, just imagine what you would feel like afterwards.
Exactly.
Obviously, you don't expect to apply it to something like throwing a hand grenade.
Yeah.
But yeah, crazy. Another experience that you had actually, and that you've told me about. I mean, obviously, Nick actually went through quite a few vocations and sort of positions in his 2 years of the army, but the main one that he was in for probably, how long was it? Like a year?
About 9 to 10 months.
9 to 10 months out of the 18 that you were in?
Yeah, about the 18 months, yep.
Right, so that position was basically, he was a sergeant that was training the new recruits that were coming in, and it was a bit of a full circle kind of thing for you, right? Because the position that you were in was the same position that you started out with when you started your military service, coming in as a newbie and having somebody ramp you up, train you. And so you spoke to me a lot about the kind of mentorship that it taught you, how to lead and develop others. And also, I'm sure it brought about a lot of perspective on yourself.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what that was like.
So like just in terms of like my posting, I was a third sergeant and became a trainer at BMTC.
Yeah.
So it's where all the recruits, the newly recruits from the civilian life transition to a military lifestyle.
Yep.
Everyone tends to start there, and it's a very fulfilling task to have as a sergeant when you take in so many different recruits and you see them grow up and transition into that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And you can see your work in them in some ways. And that whole mentorship idea is, I think the biggest takeaway I took from that is because, I took about 1,000 plus recruits in my 9 to 10 months as a trainer.
Yep.
And different batches of recruits that I had, they came from different academic systems or backgrounds and different cultures as well. So I would kind of have to tailor my teachings towards these different backgrounds.
Right.
And the reason I bring that up, I think, is because my biggest takeaway from that is that you have to kind of be able to tailor how you approach others to have the most effective output, I would say. So especially when I was teaching this polytechnic and junior college students,
Okay.
and I was teaching polytechnic students, I found like they were much more effective and efficient when it came to on the ground practical work.
Right.
But for junior college students, for example, they were more like able to understand just in terms of like teaching in the classroom. But when it came to on hands, maybe they preferred just a teaching in the classroom rather than actually doing it on.
Okay.
In the
Were there any
itself.
specific kind of recruits that you really felt, oh my gosh, this is really difficult. I can't seem to click with you.
For sure. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, right? Like, you always meet people that you click and you get along with, but you also meet people that you actually just do not. There's always just a gap between the two. You're not on the same wavelength.
And I guess that bond that you make, the bond that you kind of form with the ones that you do click with, is just such a nice feeling to have. Because I remember at one point, you had this sort of assignment where you had to go and check on one of your recruits and see if he was kind of sick.
You
right?
came with me.
Yeah, it was about like 5 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
And so I said, you know what, I'll come along with you. And when we knocked on this guy's door just to check if his like sick leave was legit,
he was wearing a SpongeBob boxers.
he was wearing SpongeBob boxers, playing mahjong with his grandma. But I mean, his face obviously was surprised when he saw you, but he didn't. I didn't really see any immediate fear from him, and I guess that's indicative of the kind of leader that you were.
I mean, that's the last thing I want to do, right? It's like my job is to transition them from civilian to military lifestyle. I don't want to instill any sort of fear. My job is to kind of instill discipline and just teach them, like, what they need to know and what's the best things that they can pick up so that the national service experience is easygoing for them. I just want them to have a simple experience, nothing too complicated, because everyone goes through the 2 years. I know how dreadful that can be, and especially since you're just enlisting, it's very daunting because you can see it's 2 years of their service. I'm already I have about maybe 8 months left. It's a big difference. So a lot of them is a mental game for them as well. You just have to remind yourself you're doing it. Everyone's here in the same position. You just have to get through it and try and look at it with a positive light. And that's kind of what I wanted to just let my recruits know. It's a long journey, but try and look at it with a positive outlook.
Right.
Yeah. But in terms of like the memories that I made in national service, I think my fondest memory will always be kind of how I motivated myself to go through all the training that I did. And I told you so much about my
and
training.
your family was a big part of that.
No, exactly.
Like, obviously I was in the year that I was with you, and obviously since then as well, like having been quite close to your family, I know that they took a lot of sort of pride in kind of your whole army experience.
The
highs and the lows. Yeah, I went to one of his graduations, and it was such a kind of humbling experience to kind of sit with his parents and have that kind of look on their faces. But yeah, talk to me just, I guess, briefly about the value of family that you kind of learned in those years.
I think my relationship with my family has always been, pretty good overall in high school. But I think through national service, I got a lot closer to them.
Right.
I think it stemmed from the idea that, all our friends were overseas. Obviously I had you, and I'm so fortunate to have had you for that year. It helped a lot. But the one constant was always my family. They were always there every single day.
Right.
And I come back from nationals, when I book out on the weekends and stuff.
Yeah, like he would only come back when, like,
sometimes
only on the
if I'm
weekends.
lucky,
And how would it work? I mean, there was no like set arrangement of like, okay, I would come back on Friday night.
No.
And I'd go on Sunday. Sometimes you wouldn't be home for 2 weeks, right?
2 or 3 weeks sometimes.
Yeah.
It was just,
And that's tough.
constant.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, considering the environment that you're in. I mean,
But then I would go through, like, my 10-kilometer runs, my navigation exercises, all these painful experiences, especially my route marches and stuff. When I'm trying to push my body to its limit and I need an extra boost, the one thing that always ran through my mind was I want to make my family proud. I would always think of my dad, my mom, and that's for 2 years of like excruciating physical pain that I pushed myself. It was always my parents that was in my mind.
Right.
And that's something that kind of stuck with me. It's kind of ingrained in your own brain that my parents are the main motivational factor. And I have a very fond memory in terms of, like, I had a navigation exercise where we walked about 50 kilometers already.
Yeah.
And we were completely lost. We were meant to reach a checkpoint.
Where did you, through the jungle?
Yeah, this is through the jungle. So it's like we were meant to reach a checkpoint at like 5 a.m.
I swear that's like a very normal environment for you at this point. I mean, I swear this every single weekend this guy was in the jungle.
Exactly. I mean, I told you about this story before.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember like we were so lost and I didn't know when it was going to stop. And my feet were just absolutely dying. I had abrasions and scars. My skin was coming off. And I had a tear coming down my eye.
Right.
I did not know whether I was going to make it or not. But the one thing that went through my mind was like, I want to do this for my mom and dad so that my parents can put on my 3rd sergeant rank for me when I get it.
So what happens is when they finish their graduation, pass this whole cadet training, with the graduation, what your parents come and they put the actual badge on you here, and that must have been such a gratifying feeling as well. I mean, I was there to see it, and it was just so nice.
It was such a strong feeling that I felt accomplished, and I could see my dad and my mom smiling and just happy. They're always the one constant I could always go to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that was my fondest memory of national service, the connection that they built with my parents and myself, for sure.
So what would you have to say to like other people that might be going through, I guess, an experience of joining the army? I mean, I personally have a friend, I have a couple of friends actually in Singapore as well as in other countries that are going into their kind of national service experiences, national service journeys. So what would you have to say to them as they kind of face their fears?
I think the most important in a positive light, because it is 2 years, it's very daunting.
To say the least.
It's a long period of your life, and you're going to see a lot of your friends go to university, and you're going to have to go through this new experience. But at the same time, in this 2 years, you know, although it might be difficult to see it now, you're going to look back at it and you're going to miss it. At the end of the day, you know, as painful as it is, as bad as it feels in the moment, you're going to absolutely miss those experiences because you're never going to have them again. You're never going to have some of those unique experiences and create those bonds ever again in your life. And so I would say my biggest advice, especially going through national service,
or just, I guess, tough situations in general, maybe?
You know, 100%. Like, go and push yourself to go experience all these new, these unique experiences.
I remember, you know, like I was at your place once, and just one of the things your dad said, I'll say it completely out of context, but I guess it applies, is just go out there and see the world.
Exactly.
Like, I guess it applies,
100%. Like, I think specifically to national service, like, if you have a vocation that's being offered to you, that's extremely tough, and you know it's a lot of work, go for it. Because it's going to be such an amazing experience. And you won't regret it. And ultimately, I think that also kind of reflects into, you know, just life in general. Be a risk taker. Go out there and just go experience something new. Right. Even if you're nervous and anxious about it, just go and do it. And you'll look back at it, whether you fail or not, it doesn't matter. You still went through it. You can talk about it and you learn from it no matter what.